gentlemen, we're going to be doing a step-by-step still life picture, and we're going to start from the back, work forward. We're going to start on a somewhat stained canvas. On my palette, you'll see the colors that I've brush out. And what we'll do is we'll take some of that mineral spirit, put it on our palette, so we get a little bit of a liquid or watery consistency of the burnt sienna. Now, we may put a little touch of blue with that to gray it out slightly so that it's not quite so strong in our mixture. That's what we'll draw with. On the palette, I'll give the list of colors. This is Viridian Green. Almost any brand of Viridian Green will work. I use the Rembrandt brand turquoise. I have zinc white. I have cadmium yellow medium, cadmium orange, cadmium red medium, and this is a Grumbacher color, phthalo red rose, but permanent rose, alizarin crimson, or permanent alizarin will work there. I have cobalt blue, I have raw sienna, and I have burnt sienna. Those are the colors on my palette that we'll eventually be drawing from. For the drawing, we're just going to be mainly working on the burnt sienna with a little touch of this blue. Now, the blue that I have here is cobalt blue, but you could use, for this, with that done, I'm going to start with the items that are in the farthest back. Now, for the purposes of demonstration, I want you to put your brushes down and just watch how we can do a symmetrical cylinder. We are going to start with the wine glass now, or the wine bottle. Now, I want you to notice that in the photograph, the wine bottle is centered in the photograph. What we're going to do is we're going to move the center of that wine bottle back on to the right, just a little bit. We don't want it dead center. So what I'm going to do here is a center line for my wine bottle, and we're not going to be able to see the bottom of the wine bottle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in a horizontal across here somewhere in the vicinity of just above the apple and the grapes and whatnot. I just need that horizontal there as a reference point. I'm going to put the top of the wine bottle about up there, and with these measurements I can now, and equal distances out from the center line, I can come with some verticals that will help me find the width to height proportions of this wine bottle. Now, as I look at that, I see that it's a little bit thin, so I'm going to widen this out. And if I use this as my center line, I have a reference point for getting a symmetrical bottle. So if this is the top, I'm going to look at how tall I can come in, and I don't have to clean this just really perfectly. I can just take some of those guidelines out, and that's going to help and prepare what we're going to do. Having taken that out, I'm going to go ahead. Now, if we look at our photograph, we see this label. This label has a little bit of an upturn, and our eye level is above the surface of the table, but it's below the top of the wine glass. So when I took this picture, my eye level was a little bit below. So where is my eye level? Well, my eye level is really close to the level of wine in that glass. So I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to suggest right here that my eye level is roughly about here. So what does that mean? On the bottle down below, there's going to be a slight upturn here. There's going to be kind of a upturn there, excuse me, a slight downturn here because that's below my eye level, upturn here. And where does it come? Well, there's kind of a rounded edge to that label that I see here, and I see just a little hint of that label over on this back side. So slight upturn on that line, slight downturn here, and this is going to be my label And that's going to be enough to get me started on that bottle. So, ladies and gentlemen, do thou likewise. Now, having done this, now I'm going to go back to the painting that we're going to be working on, and I'm going to do the wine glass next to my bottle. Where is the center of my wine glass? Now, I see the pedestal of my wine glass is off to the side just slightly. There's the center of my wine glass. There's going to be grapes in front of it eventually. So, I've got the center there. Now, where does the very top of the wine glass intersect the bottle? Right about there. Now, at this point, I'm going to make a very important point, and that is, we are being inspired by this photograph, but we are not going to be the prisoners of it. Now, we may end up with a wine glass that is, I'm going to move the center line over just a little bit more. We may end up with a wine glass that's a little fatter or a little skinnier than what's in the photograph. We may end up with a wine bottle that's a little fatter or skinnier than what's in the photograph. We may end up with a bottle that's taller or shorter. No sveta. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to be inspired by this photograph, but we're not going to be the prisoner of it. Now, as I look at this, where does the width of the wine glass fall? It falls right about there. So if I'm going to bring this center line over a little bit more. I'm going to bring the center line over to about right here. About right there. Bring it over just a little bit more. So now, when I see the far right extremity of the wine glass intersects the bottle right about here, I can take the handle of my brush. If I want to do it this way, I can take the handle of my brush, move my finger over, and boom, there is the left extremity. So you see the distance from here to here. You want to have the distance from here to here be the same as the distance from here to here. And that helps make that symmetrical. Are you with me? So this is how we can do it. Now, it's just using verticals and horizontals that help us in this regard. Now, as far as down here, where's that label to the top of the wine glass, or the base of the wine glass? The base of the bowl of the wine glass comes about here relative to that white label. So that's a little way of helping out there. So where's the widest portion of the glass? I'm going to put the widest portion of the glass about here. Where's the level of the wine? The level of the wine looks like it lines up pretty darn close to this widest portion of the wine glass. So what I can do from this point is I'm going to bring the lip of the wine, the top lip of the wine glass in just a little bit. So the very top of the wine glass is going to have that little bit of a flare outwards towards the shoulder of it. Here is the base of my wine glass. Maybe I can freehand this at this point and have something that's close enough. I'm going to come down to about here on this thickness here. So I'm going to put in a little bit of a guideline there and a little bit of a guideline here. And now grab some more paint, and I'm going to try to capture that arc. Now I'm going to get down here, going from this point, I'm going to round that out like that, round this out, and I'm going to round this out, coming to about here. Now, that's close enough for our drawing. This comes up just a little bit here, and I'm going to see the back of that ellipse back here somewhere when we get to the finer points of our painting. And then here's the pedestal. That's going to disappear behind the grapes. So what I'm going to do now is take a little bit of the mineral spirits, and I'm going to take out some of these guidelines for my wine glass, but I'm not going to completely take out this edge back here because I want to show this is a crystal wine glass. I'm going to be able to see through it to see the label here, but the wine is going to obscure the view of the label down here. So I'm going to wipe those out, and then I just clean up my edges a little bit. Any questions on that? Okay, do thou likewise. This is going to help me out. You see the grapes? Okay. And now there's going to be some leaves. There's some leaves up in here. There's a leaf that comes back over this way a little bit. And as I look at this, I want to come up a little bit higher over here. I'm going to bring this grape up, maybe this grape up a little bit higher back here. Overlap the apple just a little bit. When I do something in back, I've got to work my way forward again. But we want to leave this right the way it is, let it dry. Try to do something close to this apple because of the nice light yellows and very pale greens and whatnot. There's some nice things going on with this apple. Now, here's my pool right here. I'm going to take some white, or I'm going to take some of that light color, some raw sienna, and I'm going to take a little bit of this yellow and orange, and I'm going to get a nice light color where I can put some light where that apple's going to be. All right? Now, as I look at it, I might need to go a little bit greenish. I'm going to go a little lighter, actually. Take some cadmium yellow and a little touch of turquoise. And I'm going to green it up a little bit. Cadmium yellow with a little touch of turquoise to get a light green. And I'm going to put some of that light green in there. I'm going to take a little more raw sienna with some of my color now. And the raw sienna is going to help it get a little bit earthy. Now, we're not going to get a perfect apple right out of the chute here. Now, take a look. There's a stem on this apple that's down in this area, so I'm going to use some of that light paint there. Maybe a little stronger touch of orange with some raw sienna in a couple of places. So now what I have is I've introduced some interesting little colors that will be part of the character of this apple. Go back to this real light green. I'm going to add a little bit more of that green in here. And this is just the beginnings. We're going to be coming back on this apple, soften these edges. And now I'm going to go with a little bit more of an orange with a touch of red. And this is going to be kind of a transition color. If you are still with me back there, kind of a transition color. And now I'm going to go with that darker red. There's a lovely dark red. So I'm going to use some of this same red that I used for my wine, and I'm going to put some of these dark reds where I see them. Lay them in, boom, and there's some dark red that comes in down in this area, comes around in the back side of my apple, and I'm going to soften that edge while I'm doing it. A little bit more of that dark red down here. Using short little strokes. And I'm probably going to have to restate some of my grapes as I'm doing this. Now there's a very dark core. So I'm going to take some dark red the dark red and some of this dark green, and I'm going to pop that core in here. Where's that? Where does the stem go? The stem goes someplace in here. So I'm going to now soften that edge so that I can suggest where that stem is going to be. And I can come out over in this area. Now you can see how this as our foundation for our apple, we'll be able to go back and work on this very easily next week, stating where the darkest darks are. You know, there's going to be some real dark reds in here in a couple of places, and that's going to help us with our apple. Work on the shape of our apple. An apple does not have to be perfectly round, by the way. Right now, I'm going to restate some of my grapes here. Suggest some of these grapes. When I restate these grapes, I have to take them all the way down, possibly. So there's a grape. Let's see. Let's see. Let me put this grape back in and this grape back in. So I'm bringing the grapes back in that I just wiped out doing the apple. Once I have that, I see that I have an area here on my bottle. I'm going to go ahead and fill in that area there, the green of the bottle. I've got to restate my grape. Restate this grape that I wiped out. This grape, this grape, and this grape. And that's going to help me there. Okay, go ahead and do your apple. Soften your edges. Look at the shape of the apple. You know, you want to have it a convincing shape. But we don't need to get it perfect at this time. The apple does not have to be perfect. We would just want it to be in the ballpark as far as its shape and the handling of our colors. I'm going to get a little bit more green in here, a little more yellow on my apple. And remember, use a little bit of your raw sienna when you're doing this yellow on the apple. And the raw sienna will make it a little bit more earthy. You don't want to have this too primary yellow. We're probably going to end up getting a little greener in a few spots as our apple develops next week. So everybody, go appleness. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started on grapeness. We're going to use these volumes that became grapes as we started from the back and work forward. We're going to keep that design, but we're going to start with just the dark. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna, some of the dark red, and a little bit of this dark green, and I'm going to get a dark, and I need to remember that my light source is coming from the upper right, this way. So thinking in terms of if the light source is coming from the upper right, the lower left on these grapes is going to be in shadow. So thinking about light and shadow on a rounded form, there's going to be shadow on the lower left portion of these grapes. And I'm using that number 2 Robert Simmons Series 42 filberts, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to rough in the shadow. First of all, I'm going to rough in the shadow where the shadow would be with the light source coming from the upper right. Now, where would I see some of these shadows back here? Now, right up on these grapes right in front, I'm going to see that shadow in here. Now, this is where we're going to start. If I had a series of golf balls instead of grapes, and these golf balls were stacked on top of one another, there'd be a consistency in where I would be able to expect to see shadows. So on these grapes, lower right hand or lower left hand corner, I'm going to put some of the shadows. Now, as we work back from there on some of these grapes, now as I see grapes in this pile, I'm going to just look for that portion of the grapes where I would expect to see a shadow in the amount of grape that I'm actually seeing. So and what I'm going to do, just for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to put the darks in, and then I'm going to put some lights in, and you're going to be quite surprised that with just adding the darks and the lights, you're going to be quite surprised with how the three-dimensional nature of these grapes start to stand out as soon as you step back a short distance. As soon as you step back a short distance, you're going to see some of these grapes as three-dimensional forms. Now, some of these forms we're going to have to tweak a little bit more than others, and we're probably going to have to put in some dark spaces in areas where we would expect to see some like dark shadows. Like, for instance, right in here, there'd probably be a dark shadow right in this area around that grape. There'd probably be some dark shadow in here, probably some dark shadow in here. We're going to just pop some of these darks where we might see them, just to help with this. Okay, now I've very, very quickly put some shadows on some of these grapes. Now I'm going to just round a few of these out a little bit more right in the foreground here. Just round them out just a little bit more, so that you can clearly see the three-dimensional pattern of light and shadow. And now I'm going to go back with a light. Okay, now these grapes are kind of these were, in the photograph, these were artificial grapes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get a variety of color, and I'm going to take some raw sienna with some of this pool color I had with some of the reds. I'm going to go in and add a little bit more color to a few of these grapes, and then I'm going to pop the lights in. Get a little more orange maybe in a couple of them. Maybe a little bit of green. We don't want them all to be the same color. Might even have a bad one. You know, kind of a brown grape. This might be a good place to have a brown grape. All right. Now I'm going to try to raise the value by going lighter. I want to keep the grapes kind of earthy. So I'm going to use some raw sienna. Little touch of the orange and red. I want to get a color that's going to look like a grape color. That doesn't really look like a good grape color. So I'm going to get some more red in it. Maybe a little bit more burnt sienna. I'm going to putz around here until I can get something that's a little bit more grapey. How do you like that word? I could. I'll take a little bit of red, put a little bit of blue in there, get it a little bit more purpley. I'm still trying to find just a grape color. I'm going to go a little bit more red. I kind of like this color a little bit. Oops. Got too dark on that one. Are you starting to see grapes? I take a little bit more orange here. I don't like that color right there so much, so I'm going to change that up a bit. Now, as I'm putting these grape colors in, I'm still using the original drawing, as it were, when I went in with that brush and made those circular motions to develop grapeness. And the old Dutch master used to do a flock of sheep going down a road in a similar manner. Let's see. So you'll see that I'm doing somewhat of a dry brush technique with the using that preliminary drawing, and I'm not trying to wipe out the grapes that I did in that preliminary drawing. I'm using them to help me with my pattern of light and shadow. Okay. Now, after having put these in like this, I didn't particularly care for that color right there. Now I'm going to reintroduce these darks again. I'm going to take some dark red. All right, so now this is just a little bit of an addition just to help you see what some of that yeast looks like on some of these grapes. So now I'm going to, there's a lot of work to do here yet, but I just wanted to show you this so that you would be, you'd have a little bit of an understanding, or I'd be giving you the rationale as far as why we're putting in some of these deeper colors. Now I'm going to go to the highlight on the grape. I'm going to go to a very kind of a light highlight color. I'm going to try to get in the ballpark here. Use some of my pool green in here. I need a light. I want to get a nice light color. I'm going to lighten this up a little bit more. Maybe get a little more red in it. Yellow. And I'm going to try to get a light that is going to stand out. And I think this is going to work. So I'm going to put this just in a few of these grapes so that you can see the effect. So now the light source is coming from the upper right. So I'm putting this on the upper right-hand portion of the grapes. You want to make sure that you soften the edge. Each time that you go to the palette, change your color just a little bit. Now I'm not going to go all over the place, with this, because I want you to have time to work on this. Now I'm going to do my brightest highlight, which is white and a little touch of blue in it. Now watch what happens here with these grapes when I put these highlights in here. And that the presence of these highlights all of a sudden makes the grapes, we're isolating the light source so that we're starting to see the three-dimensional quality of the grapes. Are you with me? Okay, so with having done that, that's the beginning of the grapes. So do thou likewise, and while you're doing that, I'm going to be doing some more work on the three-dimensional quality of these round grapes and this overall clusters of grapes. There's a lot of kind of drawing-related stuff as far as a cluster of these spheres called grapes. The pattern of cast shadows where one grape and the light source projects a shadow across another surface of a grape or the surface of another grape. These things, this is kind of labor intensive, but if we take our time and work on our drawing, we'll end up with three-dimensional grapes in a three-dimensional cluster of grapes. Question? Okay. Do thou likewise. And now, to finish things off a little bit, I'm going to go to a little bit lighter value, and I'm going to show a little bit of the light hitting some of these grape leaves back here. But I don't want it to be strong. Very low-key grape leaves. Now, as I was saying earlier, we do the grapes first, and then taking a look at the stems. You see that color? You can see a lot of raw sienna in that color, but they're still a little bit green. So I'm going to get some raw sienna, a little touch of green in there. And now I'm going to go to a small brush, a smaller brush. And let's see if I can find one here. We'll just put in I'm going to put we're going to suggest some of these they can be darker. And then we can show some highlights in a few places. We'll get a little bit more light in a couple of spots by taking some of these light colors here. And get some darker colors in a few places with the dark green, maybe a little touch of raw sienna with it. We're showing where maybe some of the grapes have already dropped off. That's a little bit too light, so now I'm going to go with a slightly darker green. but we want to keep it earthy. So we add raw sienna, burnt sienna. Where would we have it a little darker? We can go a little darker still. That seems a little bit too strong right there, so I'm going to darken that up a little bit. You can see the coffee working. My hand is shaking like a leaf. Okay, a couple of lighter lights. Now this is something that we can work on, get started, then come back and clean it up where we got a little bit too fat, where the coffee made my hand shake. It's not because I drank too much coffee, but the coffee is at fault here, not me. Yeah. Okay, now I'll clean this up a little bit more, and then we pretty much have it. Working on this some more, but I don't think I'm going to work on it anymore. Here, I'll put a little bit more attention on here. We'll put it in a picture frame so that you can see what it looks like when it's framed up. I'm going to put a brighter highlight right on the leading edge of that wine glass. There's other things that we would be doing in the fine-tuning on the grapes and the leaves and whatnot, but as far as finishing up the painting, we're as close as we need to get on the video. It's now in the frame. I still need to put my name on it. There's a few very, very subtle, delicate little things that we do in the grapes, on the leaves, to finish it off. But for the most part, all the foundational stuff that the viewer would need to be able to do as it were, a copy of this photo. It's all here, and with that, I think we're going to shut this down. I hope that there's been something educational that's been of great benefit to you in the process, step by step, doing this. So if you do a painting like this, we'll send the photo. If you order the video, we'll send a photo of this with the video so that you'll have this in your possession, and the step-by-step in producing this still life as an educational experience. It should have far-reaching benefits for you and benefits for the long term of your painting. So have a good painting experience. Keep your paint brushes wet. Try to paint, several times a week if you can. And good luck, and I hope we hear from you.